standard, and more and more and more quickly all the time. It's as if the world is saying, you guys, you got to grow up fast. In your consciousness, in your actions, in the decisions we all make collectively, and all manner of things, we are being pressured to evolve very quickly.
Amen to that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you, Aju.
You're very welcome. Yeah. And you're right. There are also, with all the problems, especially around money and everything, there are some wonderful people doing some amazing things. I meet them, I've worked with them, I've talked with groups of CEOs that have multi-million-dollar companies. What they want to have to do with me, I still wonder sometimes. But the ones that make their way to me and me to them, it's just amazing and really heartening that they're, for all the terrible things we hear about, and there are a lot of terrible things that happen, there are a lot of really good people, even people that have a lot of money and are in very powerful positions running big companies. There are people that take advantage of that like they always have been, but there's also some people that are doing some really quite amazing things, and it's really interesting to be in their presence. When you talk about the challenges that they face that we sometimes don't even know about. I was speaking to a group of them a few years ago, and we spent all day together. Small group, about 25 of us. And they all owned multi-million-dollar companies. And we were having a dinner. After dinner, we were in a big, huge living room and just sort of easily chatting. And one of them told of this sort of the practical nature of trying to implement these, what I would say are high values, really, really high, noble values. And he talked about having a company that was growing at 300% to 400% a year. And it started off with, when he started, he very consciously constructed the whole culture of the company around very beautiful, really empowering values and altruistic values also, to really take in the what human beings really need to thrive in a company that's really dedicated to the welfare of things and people beyond their company. And then this company took off, and it's growing 300-400% a year for about 3 years, and he's watching, and no matter how hard he's trying, he's watching this culture that he'd set up getting compromised just by trying to keep up. And he told me this wonderful story about when he had to go to his board of directors and his investors at the investor meeting and basically try to sell them on the idea that he was going to stop he was not going to let the company grow at all for the next 2 years. Put a total moratorium on growth until he got that culture back to that altruistic, higher functioning, humanitarian kind of culture that they started with. And the story he tells about looking at his investors as their jaws dropped. You can imagine, they're counting the money, right? They're like, woo, 300% a year, we got a hell of investment going here. And he's saying, well, we're going to stop that for 2 full years because we got to catch up. And this is why we got to catch up. It's good for business, yes, that's what he sold to them, but it's also good for the people that work for us and for what we're trying to do in the world. And these kind of like little moments, you realize there are those people that are struggling and that are trying. And bless his heart, he was a good enough salesman, they went for it. And he did it, and they did. They did. Over about 2 years, they reassembled, they got the whole structure back online, all the old principles working, and away they went. So sure, we need a lot more of that. We need a whole lot more of that. But we also need to recognize it where and when it's happening. because I think the more people know that there's amazing things happen, it inspires other people, right? It inspires other people. And that's a wonderful thing. Who's going to come back to you? Come on up, my friend. Yes, in the dark shirt. You. If I have time, I'll come back to you too. Pardon me. I know.
This is so nice of you to do. Thank you. And I know that these questions might sound silly to some people because they're coming from our own perspectives. But thank you because you're
all the questions.
Your words.
There's no such thing
right.
as a silly question to me.
No, of course. And this might be a bit like elementary, but your words are like so precise, and you have so much compassion. So really, I'm sorry. Let me go off of this. So my mind, it tries to like connect everything. I think I'm pretty like intuitive, kind of a feeler. So when I begin to hear like truth, like it's accepted immediately. Like inside, there's just like yes. The only thing that could like connect everything, right? So maybe this is like an intellectual understanding. My experience, I'm not sure. I have frequent moments of just like deep connection to everything, like an astonishment, kind of an awe. But continually in my life, I've been pulled back into the past, and maybe other people have had the same problem. And
many.
And obviously, we know like time is just kind of a mental projection. But I see like insincere perfection, so it's strong kind of conditioning to believe I can and need to reach some like great potential as a human form, right? This is kind of subsided a bit. But my mind still sees like unlimited possibilities and like potential in like our human forms and our experiences. So I want to do it all. Like I really love life, right? So I used to get angry, or not angry, but like frustrated that like why would infinity throw up all these possibilities and tempt us and then like not let us do it all like in a lifetime, right? So I know better. This is not really the spirit, but so here my mind goes on retreat. Like, what if I would have realized things back when I was 15? I would have lived so differently, more open, less limits, like approach relationships, kind of a decision's different, like less hesitation, right?
We're not in a rush, by the way.
I'm sorry. I don't want to take up people's time. This is another thing that I get caught up into.
I know, we're not in a rush.
I know,
it's okay.
I know.
Enjoy
everyone
yourself.
Wants to.
You're not going to get the opportunity again for a while, so you're at a microphone in front of a lot of people. We'll both relax together.
All right.
Okay.
I don't want to. I know.
I know.
Right,
I appreciate your concern for everybody else.
Okay, so this is hard to accept when you start to see things like a bit more clearly, right? So, for example, just an image of a girl in like Chicago that I saw like years ago kind of just pops up, and I was super attracted to her, and this would have been like the right action, like no thinking, just go up and like engage, right? And I do this sometimes, but now, like I hesitated. There was some depression for another kind of a relationship, so it just blocks me, right? Like we just block these moments in life, right? And it's like crushing. Like that moment's lost forever, right? Like ultimately it doesn't matter or exist, obviously, but I'll never know like what could have unfolded if I was living closer to the reality as we're all trying to do. So I know this is.
What did you want to ask me?
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. Let me make a deal with you, okay?
Okay.
You only have to say sorry again if you say I'm sorry again. If you say I'm sorry, then I want you to apologize for saying it. Okay. There are really good times to say I'm sorry.
Okay.
This isn't one of them.
Okay.
Okay?
How can we like reduce or like discount like our human experience? Like because
you can't.
It's just maybe this is like that value judgment, but I guess it's just like crushing to have kind of these missed opportunities, and I think
only if you're looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess here's my question: is the only way to like find our like devotion and like kind of live like our dharma, and like if so, like how can that better find us, right? How can that better find us? And
okay, I can help you with that.
Instead of serving this like egoic kind of potential, right?
Okay, I get it.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But you see like the crushing aspects of us like missing these opportunities. Anyway.
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. That's just me, huh? Anyway.
No, I understand it. I remember thinking such thoughts and feeling such feelings along. I do that. But it's just what we crush ourselves with is the story we tell ourselves of what could have been. That's what we hurt ourselves with, of what could have been. But what could have been is literally, it's a fantasy.
All right.
It's an idea. Who knows how it would have been? You could be with that person.
Exactly.
It could have been an absolute unmitigated disaster. We never really know how anything could have been. So the thing that frees us, actually, is not a new pattern of thinking, not to overlay a new point of view or a new viewpoint of life. It's actually simply to come into coming into our experience in a way that we can see and be with what's true. It's the truth that puts an end to all the spinning, which is, I don't know whatever could have happened. That's the truth. I can tell myself it's a missed opportunity, but it might have been an opportunity for the worst thing that would have ever happened to me.
Right.
I can't possibly know. And that's not a belief system. That's not an overlay. It's just a reality. Anything that didn't happen, we cannot possibly know. We cannot possibly know a single thing about what didn't happen because it didn't happen.
Right.
Right? And you're right. When we do look back with regret, which seems to be a very human tendency, when we do look back with regret, the problem is that it keeps us from actually seeing and experiencing and noticing what's happening right now. So we keep passing by more things that we'll have an opportunity to regret. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it all begins with really telling yourself some simple truths. I don't know what could have happened. There could be lots of potential that I could unfold in this life. Life is a wide and vast thing. We can get all tied in knots about what we imagine our extraordinary potential to be. But as this wonderful phrase, I think it's wonderful, that I said a few days ago, that the poet William Stafford's mother told him when he was young, be what the world is trying to become.
Right.
And we, as human beings, we tend to go cosmic in our thinking because, we secretly want to live these immense lives often, when, God forbid, if you live an immense life, it's look at the people who are, it's not all it's cracked up to be. When we look at it, that's to look at everything from the view of the mountaintop. But when we kind of get down a little bit quieter, be what the world is trying to become. There's something that's quieter and you can actually connect more with your life. Connect more with you as an incarnation. It's one of the easiest ways to start to find your way when we kind of listen in a little bit more quiet way. Because so often the littlest things, the biggest things in life start off in the littlest possible ways. I think that's one of the secrets that we're often not told. It's someone attending to something that everybody else overlooked. And then something becomes of it. If we start out wanting something grand, then we're actually just misunderstanding that it's the attending to the small things that creates the trajectory for a life. And if we are going to have a big life, it's often an outcome of paying attention to the really small things. The small little moments that you have no idea where they'll lead. The most lovely things in life are those times, is it not, when life takes a turn that you didn't expect? You planned on it going this way, and then all of a sudden it goes this way. And sometimes you look back and go, God, I wish it went that way, because you have an imagination of what you think would happen. But sometimes when it turns the other way, if we're paying attention, sometimes the way it turns is quite amazing.
That happens to all of us, right?
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And
It's the little things, you know. It really is so much the little things.
All right.
So I know that feeling. I know because I know what it is. I know what it is to be, you know, younger than 53, that I am, and you do sense something that's very real. It's the reality of great possibilities.
I know.
Right?
It's
great
overwhelming.
potentialities.
So much energy. So I just
Yes,
so much,
I know.
like,
I
fire
can
and
feel
passion,
that,
yeah.
and I think, and I don't want to put a damper on that energy, but I think what's useful is when you kind of give it avenues to move through, and if that energy is looking always towards the future, then the avenues engagement in the present seem to be, where do I start? What do I do? You just can't, and you get more and more confused, and you get more and more kind of anxious about it. It's what gets the energy going more, and it gets really, really hard. Where if you take that same sincerity, because that's what I hear in you, right?
Yeah.
You want to be a really beneficial presence in this world. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just feel, I just want to be inspired, and
Yes.
you know, maybe inspire if who knows?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes. I hear. That's what I hear underneath all of that. And I would encourage that inspiration. But I just would add that often the greatest things and the greatest inspiration, they come from the quiet places. The people that are really destructive in life, they're being inspired by the really noisy things. Right. I want to do this, I want to achieve, it's all about me, I want to have this part, you know, and they can be very inspired too, you know, but it can end up to be quite destructive. But when you kind of listen to those, funnel that inspiration, you know, because the world is looking for better and better and more and more and more intimate ways to love.
Right. That's
whatever you're doing, and you can
just that in your everyday, just every moment with like the people, just like what appears from you, right? Just engaging with everyone. You do it every moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's enough.
Who knows where that will lead, right? Yeah, I never thought that my engagement in my spirituality was going to be leading me here sitting talking to you. Never in a million years. Yeah. My teacher taught out of her living room. When she asked me to teach, I pictured a living room. Before she, her first way of asking me to teach was, well, the next, home or apartment you pay attention to the size of the living room. And I thought, why is she telling me that? And then the next thing was, well, I thought you might be good at doing this. And I was like, oh, okay, she's teaching in her living room. And I thought, well, I'll have 4 or 5 people around on a Sunday afternoon. And yet I was like, okay, I can do that. Yes. It's a little thing. And it started, 15 years before that, by following my inspiration.
That thing you just pulled to do, right? It just unfolds. But I hate that we block it.
I had to do.
I know.
I had to do it.
I guess it's harder growing up, kind of as we get conditioned, because we block it, right? Like as kids, we block it. But
yeah,
that's the whole point of this, right?
It is the whole point
to just follow that.
It is the whole point of it. The first thing is, our society funnels our inspiration into this package that's almost exclusively around what am I inspired to do.
Right.
And that's okay. What we do in the world's important. But what gets left out is what informs really beautiful doing. What am I inspired to be? Be, not so much do. When the doing is an expression of your being, it's the being.
That's what the world wants to become, right?
Yes,
recognize itself. Yeah,
that's right. Okay. The world wants to become that. The world is trying to become awake. Our impulse to be awake.
That's how we do everything.
We think it's ours. We think it's I want to awaken. Actually, it is it's the structure of life itself, desiring to become conscious, fully conscious of itself. And we as forms of life feel that impulse of existence to be fully aware of itself. It's its drive towards full self-awareness or full self-realization. That's what we feel as our individual spiritual impulse. But we're actually feeling something from the very beginning, which is universal. It comes from the totality of existence. Oh. Imagine that, the whole cosmos desiring to be fully conscious of itself, and one of the forms in which it's doing that through is you.
And everyone.
And everyone.
Everything.
That's right. And
this is behind everything that we do as humans, as we find ourselves, right?
That's
it's just,
right.
Anyway.
And then your doing gets informed by that. Not that you have to wait until something happens to get along with doing whatever you do in life, but it becomes more and more of a, not an idealized expression, not an idealized. When I was doing all this, when I was going through all my spiritual, not that I recommend this, by the way, I was fixing bikes in a bike shops. That was my big job and career for till I was 30 years old. I don't advise it, but it's just a way of saying we also don't want to get too overly idealized with expecting, everything we do is to be some perfect expression of our dharmic desire. Right. Sometimes part of what we're doing is actually helping to support our dharmic desire. Yeah, but if you remain true to yourself, if you remain true to that impulse, me and you, we might sit down and have a cup of tea together 15 years from now, and we'll probably both say to each other, "Wow, never expected to end up here 15 years later, did you?" And you'll probably say, "Couldn't have ever dreamed of it in my wildest imagination."
Even when our mind goes back, it sees those.
Yeah.
Man, anyway.
Could you have ever, 20 years ago, would you have ever pictured yourself right here?
Right.
I couldn't have.
Yeah,
That's
right.
the fun of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Anyway, that is the fun. Thank you.
Okay, my friend. Great. Okay, I'm getting the word to do this. And then we'll take a break. I want to read you something. After I heard the wonderful poem this evening, I decided not to read you this poem to begin with because I didn't. But I just checked in and it said, "Do it, Ajahn." So we're gonna do it. And this is a poem I've wanted to read for a long time. I've never done it, and it's for some people. It's kind of a famous poem. It's a poem by Dylan Thomas, a wonderful Welshman that died in the 50s. And he was one of our better poets, or one of better poets of that part of the world produced. And this is one of his more well-known poems, and it's called Fern Hill. And it's a poem that, if you listen to it carefully, it's when we went back talking about childhood, the innocence. It is about the innocence of childhood. It's about the loss of innocence. You hear echoes of Genesis. You have lots of he actually, there's a wonderful quote on the back jacket where Dylan Thomas said, that he wrote poems for the love of man and in praise of God. Now as I was young and easy under the apple boughs, about the lilting house and happy as the grass was given, the night above the dingle's starry time let me hail and climb, golden in the heyday of his eyes, and honored among wagons I was prince of the apple towns, and once below a time I lordly had the trees and leaves, trail with daisies and barley down the rivers of the windfall light. He's recalling coming back to the farm where he grew up and remembering a time of childhood, of feeling like he was in the Garden of Eden. And as I was young, as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns, about the happy yard, and singing as the farm was home, in the sun that is young only once, time let me play and be golden in the mercy of his means, and green and golden I was huntsman and herdsman. The calves sang to my horn, the foxes on the hills barked cleat and cold, and the Sabbath sang slowly in the pebbles of the holy streams. All the sun long it was running. It was lovely, the hay fields high as the house, the tunes from the chimneys. It was air and plain, lovely and watery, and fire green as grass. And nightly under the simple stars, as I rode to sleep, the owls were bearing the farm away. All the moon long I heard blessed among stables and night jars flying with the ricks and the horses flashing into the dark. And then to awaken, and the farm like a wanderer white with the dew, come back, the cock on his shoulder. It was all singing. It was Adam and maiden. The sky gathered again, and the sun grew round that very day. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light, in the first spinning place, the spellbound horses walking warm out of the winning green stable on to the fields of praise. And honored among foxes and pheasants by the gay house, under the new-made clouds, and happy as the heart was long. In the sun born over and over, I ran my heedless ways, my wishes raced through the house-high hay, and nothing I cared at my sky-blue trades that time allows in all his tuneful turning, so few and such morning songs, before the children green and golden follow him out of grace. Nothing I cared in the lamb-white days, that time would take me up to the swallow-thronged loft by the shadow of my hand, in the moon that is always rising. Now that riding to sleep, I should hear him flying with the high fields and wake to the farm, forever fled from the childless hand. Oh, I was young and easy in the mercy of his means. Time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. Fernhill. I read this when I was in my 20s, just beginning on my spiritual path, maybe 20 years old, 19. And I heard at the end of that poem, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. And I remember thinking, that's the inception. That's when one begins to wonder. That's when one seeks to be free of confinement. That's when one may remember the old days on the old farm, when you felt like Adam or Eve in paradise and carefree. And yet, I remember reading that and thinking even then, he couldn't go back. Nobody goes back. That the way was forward. The way was forward. The way back to the garden was the way ahead. There was no going back, and yet there was going ahead. And there was and is a discovery, a rediscovery of innocence and beauty. And that glorious feeling of, as he says, the house high hay blowing in the wind. We've all had those days. And we can all have them still, over and over again. And that's the work that we're doing. That's the task that we're called to.